You wanna know what my problem was back then? Not me being homeless, not me being drunk and hungry, walking around reeking of vomit and cheap vodka. No, my problem was that all those years behind corporate desk made me weak and complacent. I may bitch and complain about corporate life, but at least it was somewhat predictable and stable, and precisely that was the reason I forgot things. Behind the desk, when I had an issue with someone, I could take it to HR and they'd solve it on their own. If I screwed up my work, my salary would be cut, but it would not be the end of the world, because I could always work overtime. So, when I was pushed back into the streets, I forgot about one important thing: that actions had consequences. You see, with the money from the town hall in my pocket, I was filled with this warm, fuzzy feeling of accomplishment and a job well done, and I went for a walk to try and figure out my next move. 'Cause sure, I had some money and wouldn't starve anytime soon, but I needed a lot more. So I went to docks to, well, in olden days I would have said to catch some fresh air, but you can see how it looks outside. Pretty sure it's been a few years now since I last saw the sun peering through all that smog. Still, I liked looking at ships coming into port on the other side of the bay, so I went there anyway. And that's when reality and those consequences I mentioned caught up to me. 'Cause you see, that Nguo guy really did have friends willing to do stuff for him. "Do not turn around, Greybeard," a voice behind me said. "For your own sake." Ah, crap. I could hear footsteps of at least several people behind me. See what I mean? Back on the force, I'd never allow myself to be sneaked up on like that. I muttered some profanities under my breath. "Colorful words, Greybeard. Maybe you should have kept to just words, instead of sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Ah, dumb bastard, I thought. I wasn't cursing you, I was cursing my own stupidity. Still, I tried to remain calm and said, "Sorry, gentlemen, but I'm not sure what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do, Greybeard. Otherwise you would have turned around. You messed with our fellow acolyte, and we don't really appreciate what you've done to him." Acolyte, I thought. Damn, I know I call them corporate cultists, but I didn't actually think they were really a cult. Then again, I did see some weird-ass posters and flags on Nguo's walls, so, well, in hindsight, maybe I should have seen this coming. Well, friends, your fellow acolyte happens to murder a man, which, despite everything, is still illegal, so, you know, I just did what Sergeant Forces would have done. I lied. "If you think Sergeant Forces would have done anything, you are more of a fool than I thought. They recognized an unprofitable scum. Nguo did what he had to for the glory of Starch Collar, and now, because of you, he will have to take a trip to jail before we can get him out. And you know what they will do to him there." "Yeah, what he deserves," I snarled. No point trying to be friendly. We all knew where this was going. I bent my legs slightly and prepared to jump into the sea. If I got lucky, I'd be over the railing before they shoot me dead. "So, boys, what happens now? You shoot an old man in the back like cowardly little shits that you are? Or were you trying to drop me already, but you're too dumb to figure out safety on your guns?" "Hilarious, Greybeard. No, we will not kill you. That is not our way," the voice said, and I realized, too late, that whoever was talking moved closer. I really was getting old. And then, through his voice and crashing of the waves, I heard something else. A sound of something being lifted. I tried to jump right away, but as soon as I moved I saw a baseball bat in my peripheral vision. And 1 second later I was flat on the ground. "We will not kill you, old fool," a dark figure said above me. "But we will make you unprofitable." Not again. How many times can I get wrecked in a week? Now, where? Oh. Shit, why here? I don't even want to think what's in this water, and it's all over my... No, don't think about it. At least I I still have all my teeth, and it seems they didn't break anything. Damn idiots can't even punch someone properly. Now, let's get the hell out of wherever this is. That was not a pleasant awakening. After they were done hammering me with their bats, Angua's crew must have dragged me all the way into the fathoms, you know, those tunnels below the city, and left me there. And, of course, they had to pick a partially flooded one. And trust me, you don't want to know what it was flooded with. Suffice to say, I was now probably carrying a few dozen diseases on me, so as I waded through the muck looking for a way out, my thoughts were focused on only one thing: taking a shower. I must have reeked like a sewage outlet, but fortunately the men who jumped me were amateurs. They didn't understand how a man could roll with the punches, and they kept interrupting each other. At one point, one of them accidentally whacked another one with his bat. Still wasn't pleasant, don't get me wrong, but at least nothing was broken, though I would feel it in the following days, that's for sure. Worst part, though, was when I reached into my pockets and realized that they took all of my cash I got from the town hall. I was back to square one, bruised, broke, and angry. Angry at this city, at the corporation, at Angua's friends, but mostly at myself. If I wanted to bounce back, I had to up my game, and fortunately the thugs did not take away my radio, so if something bad happened again, I'd hear about it. Not that I hoped something bad would happen, of course, but I really didn't have many other marketable skills. Still, all those thoughts were completely sidelined by the stench coming off me. I crawled out of the tunnels and realized I was in one of the apartment buildings, and the few people I encountered instantly ran away at the mere sight and smell of a shit-covered swamp monster. It was not a time to be either polite or lawful, so I started walking from door to door, watching through keyholes and listening through the wood, hoping to find an apartment where no one was inside. But it was already evening, so most people were back home from work. Sometimes I thought I found a good place, but when I tried to open the door I could hear someone moving inside. I had to climb 9 bloody floors and trail a lot of filth along the stairs until I found an empty apartment. And while I probably should have been quiet about it, by then my patience was running out. So instead of picking the lock, I just barged in. Sorry, whoever lived here. I hope lock replacement wasn't too costly. Almost got caught by automated security system the moment I walked in, but I managed to dodge the laser and feel my way in the dark until I found the bathroom. Walked into the shower in my clothes and turned on the highest pressure, hoping all the muck on me wouldn't clog the pipes. Then I took another round without clothes, then another one just to be sure. I hated being dirty more than anything else. Then I cleaned teeth with someone's toothbrush, but had enough mercy in me to just take it with me afterwards to toss it away. Then I stumbled out, still in dripping clothes. When the person who lived there came back, they must have had many questions, so I didn't want to stick around to answer them. So, shower done. But if I didn't want to rely on breaking into other people's houses for basic hygiene, I had to do something about my financial situation. I was about to tell you why I needed money anyway, right? So, when the corps took over, they quickly made it clear that they don't care about unprofitable people, and since one of the best ways of extracting money out of everyone was through paying rent, the laws against homeless became a bit harsh, to say the least. With no place to live, I was now classified in corporate systems as a vagrant, a position not even at the bottom of the ladder, but far, far below it, forbidden from even looking at the ladder itself. The moment my apartment was seized, a clock started ticking. If I didn't have a place to live, and a place to pay rent for, within a week, I would be unpersoned in the corporate hierarchy. There's no income in keeping data on unprofitable citizens, after all, they would say, and simply remove my existence from all documents and databases. My corporate account and passport would be removed and I'd become no one, nothing, unable to do even such basic things as shopping. I knew some people who ended up like that, some from the Force, some from other lots of life, people who couldn't adapt when starch took over. None of them ended well. And I didn't want to follow in their footsteps, so now I had less than a week to find myself a new home, somewhere within the district, because as sure as shit couldn't afford a boat to the mainland, not when databases had me marked as a vagrant. So there was only one thing to do. Use my experience from the Force to get some money together before the timer ran out. Fortunately, since only law enforcement around were cob drones who only cared about their paychecks, it meant I didn't have to look far to find something to do. But to do this job I needed tools. I had my radio, my watch and my flashlight and some crap I could use to maybe pick a lock or two. But I needed a lot more, and if I wanted to get anything I'd have to buy it, but Anguo's boys stole all my money. And getting more, well, it could have been easy. I could have just stolen everything that wasn't nailed down in that apartment I took a shower in, but that was not the line I wanted to cross just yet. I was not a thief, or, well, no, that is a lie, but I was not someone who steals from normal, law-abiding citizens. Perps and criminals, on the other hand, now that was something else. Hell, even when I was back on the Force, we often nabbed some stuff from apartments of the sick bastards we arrested. Not something to be proud of, sure, but even back then the pay wasn't all that great. But there were no criminals in sight for now, so if I wanted to get any money I had to swallow what little pride I had left and ask someone for it. But you surely can guess how that went. Even back in better times, people were rarely inclined to part with their money, especially when the person asking was some foul-smelling, alcoholic swamp monster. I went around for well over an hour pestering people and all I got was barely enough change to buy me a cup of coffee, let alone all the tools I needed for the job. But I did hear some very colourful words describing me. Some of them I never heard before, so I guess young corporate-raised generation actually had its own culture. Didn't bother me. Pride was something I left behind long ago, back when the corps took over. It was one of the tools they used to get into people's heads, and it worked, especially on the kids who just started their work. "Oh, surely you don't want to just be a drone," a suit would say to them. "But if you would only fulfill these criteria, you could advance up the ladder, all the way to Senior Executive Project Manager," they would say. And those poor kids would hear it and work their asses off for 16 hours a day, sometimes even more, every day of the week for years, only to get some fancy title. A title, mind you, that had barely any financial benefits than just being a basic drone. But oh, how they fought tooth and nail between each other for it, all thinking that if they just walked a bit more overtime, the boss would notice them and lift them up on the corporate ladder, as if those spots weren't already saved for friends and relatives of the management. So I embraced my title of the basic drone long ago, and all the sneers and jeers that came with it. But truth was, I couldn't really waste much more time on wandering around and begging. At this rate, it'd take few days to gather enough money, so instead I just decided to start looking for work right away and then improvise. The radio was silent, and that was a good thing despite everything, but I knew there wouldn't be any issue finding some work. Without any law enforcement and with money being more important than anything else, people dealt with their problems like in the olden days, by hiring other people, essentially mercenaries, to do whatever was needed. So many places had boards where anyone could pin their offer, and because no one cared about actual law, some of those jobs were quite interesting. In the town hall itself I saw at least 3 notices about people looking for a hired muscle to either beat down some rival or to trash their apartment, and because enforcers didn't care, it was all perfectly legal. Hell, enforcers themselves posted on those boards. Sometimes there was someone they wanted to interrogate or detain for a time, but because they sure as hell didn't have any hazard pay, the Corpo Corps preferred to scrounge up some money together and post a notice, hoping that some desperate bounty hunter would do their job for them. Not gonna lie though, not one of those options seemed interesting. I didn't want to go out and wreck someone's face or apartment just because they got into argument at work, but I equally didn't want to do enforcers' jobs for them. And I 100% didn't want to even think why some people wanted to acquire photographs of someone. There were some recovery jobs. I found one posted in a bar nearby, but it was clear that it was some spat between corporate higher-ups, and I didn't want to meddle with them either. So, after walking around for an hour and looking for a perfect job that didn't exist, I finally gave up and picked up one notice from the local enforcer division. It was a usual template with a lot of legal jargon, so I skipped reading most of it, and instead turned the paper around to see the details. Apparently, the person they wanted in for questioning was living in the Fathoms, and they also had their fingerprints and even actual address. So, a really simple job. One could even wonder why the rent-a-cops didn't go in themselves if they knew where the person lived, but that was where the final line of the notice came in. Suspect may be armed and dangerous, it said, and if he lived in the Fathoms, there was no may. You see, Fathoms are these back streets and tunnels where you go where you have nowhere else to go in life. Place where you won't see the sky, hope, or even basic human decency. If I didn't get enough cash for a new apartment, I'd end up there as well, as one of the ghosts. So if the suspect lived in that cesspit, they were 100% armed and dangerous, so no wonder desk jockeys in the hall wanted someone else to nab him for them. And I was tempted to just walk away, but the pay the notice promised was too good. So I braced myself for the worst and made my way into the Fathoms. You can imagine my sigh of relief when I realized that the suspect was living above the ground level. Last thing I wanted was to return to the basement after wading through all that muck. It was still very much Fathom's experience though, garbage everywhere and a horrid, acidic smell of an area where the company decided it would be unprofitable to install any proper sewers. But then, a sudden positive surprise. As I clambered up the stairs, I noticed that the doors to the apartment I was looking for were open, as if inviting me to waltz in and handcuff whoever was in there. Except I had no handcuffs, and I couldn't afford handcuffs. I fished out some packing tape from a bin on the way there, but I doubted it would work. It was too soggy and turned to mulch when I tried to find the end. And the other problem was that there was more than one person inside. I was so used to living alone, my brain kinda forgot that people sometimes have partners or roommates, especially in the Fathoms where another person could help you pay rent. So now I had a slight issue. Namely, I had to figure out which one of the two people inside was the one enforcers wanted. I could technically chain two of them to the pipes and let the suits sort them out, but they didn't pay for a job half done. Now, aside from fingerprints, the only info about the suspect that was provided was their eye color, so not particularly useful in this situation. But work like that is basically just a process of elimination, so if I could confirm that one person wasn't the right target, then the next one automatically became the objective. And there was a perfect opportunity as I arrived. There was a man and a woman in the apartment, and through the windows I could see that they were in separate rooms. Still no clue why they left their doors wide open, but I wasn't going to question this luck. Instead, I sneaked in, crept behind the woman as she was putting on her coat, probably preparing to leave, and pulled out my scanner to grab her fingerprints. And then, the worst enemy of all home invaders reared its head, the creaky goddamn floor. It's a good thing I was crouching, because in one fluid motion, the woman turned around and swung a blade that would have slit my throat right open. Shocked me so much I fell on my ass and started crawling away, but she just shrieked like a banshee and charged at me. Barely dodged another swing as I got back on my feet and ran outside, but she followed me into the rain as well. "Oi, oi, oi, lady, chill!" I shouted, but she didn't listen and chased me down to the staircase. "Lady, I just want to talk!" I tried again and stopped, raising my hands, hoping she would calm down. She didn't calm down. Instead, her knife sliced me across the face. Well, shit. My brain just shut down in that moment. A second before, she was someone to be calmed down, but now she was a target to be neutralized. We were on the stairs and she was above me, so I grabbed her by the legs and threw her to the ground. She kept swinging that knife like a maniac and wrecked my coat, but I finally managed to grab her by the head and slammed into the wall with a wet crack. "Stop resisting," I muttered as she went limp. Then the red fog lifted from my eyes and I immediately checked if I didn't hit her too hard. Fortunately, she was still breathing, but I doubted she'd get up in the next few minutes. I sat on the stairs next to her, wheezing as if I ran a marathon, and lifted her eyelids. Not green, not my suspect. As my old captain would say, that was unnecessary use of force. Not the best conduct on my part, but fuck it. She swung the blade first, and not like corp police would do anything about it anyway. I let out a stream of profanities, grabbed her knife, which she was still clutching in her hand despite being unconscious, and then stumbled out outside and tossed the bloody thing into the sea. Try to stab me now, lady. Only then I checked myself for wounds. Fortunately, the knife she was using was just a tiny box cutter. I had a few cuts on my coat and a slash across my face, but it wasn't too deep and there was barely any blood. I should have probably went to a doctor or at least pharmacy to get a bandage, but I wasn't even thinking about it. Chicks dig scars, they used to say, and besides, I was now fully in work mode, and a tiny wound like that was not something that could stop me. Besides, I was sure I was on the clock now. The suspect no doubt heard the scuffle we just had, so he may have already been far away. And it certainly looked like it. When I went up the stairs, all lights in that apartment were off, and I thought I was too late. So you can imagine how confused I was when I looked through the window and saw that the guy I was looking for went the fuck to sleep. His lady friend almost gutted me in another room, and he just went, "Sure, nothing out of ordinary there," and dozed off. I could not believe my eyes. I still can't believe it. It must have been a trap, I thought, as I sneaked into the apartment again. But no, I could hear him snoring through the door. Must have had a hard day, that guy. Didn't we all? Could have just nabbed him right there and then, but I wanted to be absolutely sure this was my suspect, and to confirm just who the hell he actually was. So, trying to contain my heavy breathing after that scuffle on the stairs, I opened the door and crept into the room with the sleeping man. It was a nerve-wracking experience. I told you already I kinda liked sneaking into people's homes, and yeah, it really does sound bad when I put it like this, but not when they are inside. One wrong move and I could have woken the suspect up, and if his lady friend was any indication, that would have ended in another fight. So I moved as slowly as possible, barely breathing, stressed so much my heart was almost beating out of my chest. Through it, I could hear my radio going off, something about a gunshot in a building nearby. I panicked for a moment, afraid that the sound would be too loud, but the man slept like a log. So I introduced myself to his drawers and found some documents, and now I had a name. Jing Fei. Well, Mr. Jing Fei, I don't know what you did, but the enforcers wanted to have a word. So kind of you to offer no resistance, I thought, and then remembered that I still had no way to actually restrain him. Almost broke my cover by swearing out loud, but Jing Fei slept really hard, like a man with clear conscience, you could say. Still, I didn't want to wrestle with another man and drag him to the hall by myself. So I swiped some money from one of his drawers, walked out the apartment, and then sprinted with all my might to the station to grab a pair of handcuffs, hoping he wouldn't wake up in the meantime. He didn't. Lucky me. Then I walked back up to his bed and quickly rolled him on his stomach and locked the cuffs on his wrists before he was even aware what was happening. What the hell? He mumbled in darkness. Honey, I'm too tired for roleplay. Can we put it off until later? Nah, mate. Today we're role-playing cops and thieves. Right now. I growled at him from behind. He spasmed as if shocked by lightning. Who the hell are you? Honey! Honey, there's a... He started, but I stuffed one of his socks in his mouth. This was already too awkward to let him continue. Look, man, I said, stepping in front of him and turning on the lights. I don't know what you did, but Corpo Cops want to have a word with you. They didn't offer much money to bring you in, so I guess you didn't do anything too bad, so just, cooperate with them, and they shouldn't fuck you up too much. I wanted to add something else, but Jing Fei, he started crying. There were tears rolling down his face and muffled groans of suffering coming from his throat. He looked broken, instantly. I was almost ready to take off his gag, but then I stopped myself. Wouldn't be the first time a suspect tried to spin some sob story to lower my guard. I got jumped by one of those back in the day, and my fellow patrol officer took a bullet for it. Never again. Instead, I turned on Jing Fei's computer, because of course he had a password for it written right next to it, and downloaded his entire social security profile. The Badgers would appreciate me being thorough. Then I closed the curtains and left, leaving the still sobbing man chained to his own bed. Guess that was not the kind of fun he was used to. Then I marched to the station, handed the receptionist a drone my already filled case notes, and took a nap on the horrendously uncomfortable bench. Sir, you cannot sleep here despite your service. The drone woke me up a few minutes later. 2 enforcers were with him, looking at me with barely contained disgust, and I knew what they were thinking. They were angry at me because they had to go to the Fathoms and bring Jing Fei and themselves. But while they looked at me with anger, the receptionist's voice was actually surprisingly warm. Hell, he even smiled for a second or two when he handed me an envelope. All data checks out. Starch Caller appreciates your service, citizen. May they prosper forevermore. May they. Now go away, you are stinking up the place. Asshole. But the envelope was full of money, so I didn't ask any questions and walked out. And then instantly slapped myself in the face, walked back in, and took another pile of case papers. That gunshot someone reported an hour or 2 ago. I was willing to bet the enforcers already trashed the place and wrecked all potential evidence, but maybe I could solve this thing for them as well, and get another bounty there. Sure, I didn't get any serious sleep for the past 2 days. Being drunk and unconscious doesn't count, and I was starting to feel wobbly on my legs, but sleep is for the weak anyway. Besides, it was a gunshot. Not a stabbing, not a bludgeoning. This was the really serious stuff. Guns were strictly controlled, so having a crazed gunman on the street was bound to cause trouble. And the enforcers certainly wouldn't solve it, because they might end up shot dead themselves in the process. So, into the rainy night I went, wondering if this was finally the day when I get a new hole in my head. When I arrived at the scene of the reported gunshot, the hair on the back of my neck went straight up, and I was overwhelmed by this dreadful feeling that I made a horrible mistake. The enforcers were already here. Now that I expected. They even taped up the place, not that it would stop anyone from entering. Even with one of them standing watching the corridor, like before, I simply walked inside in one quick motion, acting like I owned the place. But as I entered through the door, I was overwhelmed by a citrus smell of detergent. A very bad sign. I went further in and found the recipient of the gunshot. A woman was lying face first on the floor in the corner of her room. But there was no blood, no bullet holes, nothing, only this overwhelming chemical smell of cleaning fluids. I approached the corpse and performed the usual autopsy that confirmed my fears. The woman was shot by some high-caliber weapon, most likely a rifle, but the wound she had was haphazardly plugged with a bunch of straps of waterproof tape. When I moved her, a few drops of blood dripped onto the carpet. I looked around and found the victim's documents. Apparently, the lady was called Laura Van Dyke, and then I spent another half an hour looking for any clues. But there was nothing. No odd fingerprints, no bullet casings, not even a single footprint out of place. but there had to be something because she clearly was shot by someone from inside her apartment. But then I found a wet patch on the carpet, absolutely reeking of disinfectant and detergent, and I realized what happened. Someone was here after the victim was killed, and whoever that was, they cleaned up the place and either removed or scrubbed away all evidence. But I had to make sure, so I walked out of the apartment and approached the bored enforcer, who was still waiting in the corridor. "Excuse me, sir, Kensington Insurance?" I started, dropping the name of largest and wealthiest insurance company in the city. The enforcer immediately started looking a bit less bored. "I'm conducting an investigation on behalf of a valuable client. Mind telling me if someone was inside this apartment after you found that woman inside? I assume you found that woman inside, right?" "Yes, sir," the rent-a-cop replied with deference, fully believing I was above him in corporate hierarchy. "I mean, yes, I found her. Then a cleaner came in from the town hall to clean up the place." I almost lost my shit there. A cleaner? From the station? Mere minutes after the murder? Right. Of course, and why did the station decide to send a cleaner here? "Well, isn't it obvious, sir? We can't have the apartment sitting empty without anyone inside paying rent, right? So the cleaner came in, washed the place up, cleaned the carpet, fixed the window and left. From what I heard, tomorrow another tenant will be moving in." "And it didn't occur to you, officer, that a cleaner could, I don't know, completely contaminate the scene of murder and destroy all evidence?" Maybe? Look, sir, the order came from the station, who got their orders from the local landowner. I'm not the one to question him." No, of course he wasn't. I was so tempted to slap this man across his stupid-ass helmet and knock some sense into his head, but I realized it would be pointless. The enforcer sounded young enough that he probably didn't remember how the world looked before Starch Cola took over. He wasn't being malicious or wasn't trying to obstruct the investigation. He was genuinely confused why I gave a singular fuck about this woman's death, because she wasn't a valued client. So I just sighed and turned around, but then something hit me. "Officer, you said the cleaner replaced a window. Why?" "Oh, I don't know. One of them was broken. I think one of the living room. She was lying next to it when I found her." I walked back into the apartment without a word, leaving the baffled cop behind. So, here we had an important piece of information. Before, I assumed she was shot from inside of her own apartment, but now I suspected someone gunned her down from outside. But if she was standing right next to the window, there could have been a dozen spots she was shot from. Stupid-ass enforcer and stupid-ass cleaner. If they didn't replace that window, maybe I could have figured out the trajectory of that bullet. But there was nothing, not even shards of glass on the floor to offer a slightest clue. I almost went outside to actually smack that kid around, but instead I decided to do something productive and broke into late Laura's computer. And there, in her mailbox, I found something I thought could lead me in the right direction. There were a few emails there, where she talked about feeling like she was being stalked. Maybe a jilted lover, I thought. Or maybe it was job-related and someone was fishing for her position. I immediately started making notes, and then I realized something. All those mails sent by Laura Van Dyke were addressed to Laura Van Dyke. She corresponded with herself. I stared at the screen blankly for several minutes, feeling exhaustion of the last few days catching up to me. Oh, I needed sleep. But instead, I had a murder case with almost no clues, and a clearly schizophrenic victim who could have also suffered from split personality disorder. It looked like I was in for a long haul, but I also couldn't shake one particular fear. What if there was no case? What if Laura ordered this assassination on herself?